So, please ignore the dirty clothes. They're not actually dirty, they're just not put away. So the 5 tips are: be proactive, set goals, hold each other accountable without judgment, be honest. Oh, my fingers look crazy. Be honest and acknowledge the uncomfortable.
When I look at the sun going down toward the sky, all I want is to be there.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Bobby Gray, and today we are starting a new series on how to talk to your significant others about finances. I was thinking to start the series off on using kind of broad tips and then breaking all the broad tips down into little videos where we kind of explore it a little further, just because I was like, these tips are a little too shallow to be its own video. So we're starting off by breaking down how to be proactive, because it's very easy to say, yes, be proactive about talking about money. But then you ask yourself, how do you actually find the courage, find an opening to really bring up the conversation about finances? So when we're being proactive about conversations about money, the first thing we should really think about is space. So space and how and where we have conversations changes a lot of the dynamics of that conversation. I was reading The Art of Gathering, and it talks a lot about how space changes the way we communicate, we think about others within that space. And a great example of this is after living in New York City and having various apartments, been able to get to know my roommates or have been able to connect with people I've lived with has been very dependent upon how our space is set up. In places where I've lived where there is literally not a living room, I've barely known any of those roommates. Places where we've had large living rooms, large gathering spaces, I've been much closer with those roommates. And that's simply because we have a space where we can get together and have conversations and get to know one another. Space is really important. In my relationship, something that we kind of work on are the beds. Now, this is not my bed. This is my parents' bed. My bed is not made. So I just thought I would use their space for a second. When we're in bed together, sitting next to each other, we have some of the best conversations, some of the deepest conversations, some of the most uncomfortable conversations. And that's because to us, our bed is a safe space where we feel like it's our space. And kind of what you need to have really uncomfortable conversations is space that is neutral and safe, where you feel like whatever you guys are going to talk about there is going to be for the betterment and the benefit of your relationship. So for other people, this might be sitting in a coffee shop, sitting at your favorite restaurant where you've had your first date and you have important anniversaries, or some place where you feel hey, this is our spot together, somewhere where you feel it connects you to. Especially for me, my love language is touch. When I feel I'm physically holding my partner's hand, snuggling into their shoulder, I feel more safe and more secure in what I'm going to say, because I feel we're more connected. I think that that's something else to keep in mind is how do you feel most connected to your partner, and make sure that that element is brought into whatever space that you're going to bring any uncomfortable conversation into. And this goes beyond finances. This is any major conversation that needs to happen between the two of you, whether it's wanting to have kids, whether you want to get married or not get married, whether you want to do a lot of those big and especially societal challenging conversations, to do that in a space where both of you feel connected and safe. So let's say you've picked out the space, you know the space, and it is where you feel most comfortable, but you still don't know exactly how to spring it up. Bring it into a game. And you know the kind of games I'm talking about, the ones where you're would you rather live on Mars and only eat asparagus, or live under the ocean and only eat seaweed, or something like that? You know what I mean? Into a game where you ask little questions. If we were stuck on a desert island, what would we bring? You know, like those kinds of questions, and just kind of like sprinkle in finance questions into that. You can do anywhere, like on a road trip. You could do this driving to the grocery store. You could do this while you guys are waiting somewhere. You could say like, you know, if we came into money, like what would we do with it? That's like a great way to kind of just start talking about finances, you know, like something that is happening around us, and depending on your background and socioeconomic situation, you might not feel this as much, but right now we're going through kind of like a wealth transfer. The greatest generation, as well as boomers, as they finish this time on earth, in this, I know this is really dark, but like as they're finishing up this cycle of existence, their financial, physical assets are going to be going down to the next generation. Well, it depends on like a lot of things, but theoretically, because there's so much wealth concentrated in this group of people, theoretically it would go down to Gen X, Gen Z, millennials, and that means that potentially you will be receiving some kind of money. So it might be a good idea to kind of like sneak these in. Like, what would we do with an extra $50,000? What would we do with an extra $100,000? And really kind of having conversations with your partner about that. You know, like what would we do if I suddenly had the opportunity to buy my house for like my childhood home? Would you sell your childhood home and put that money towards something that you guys are doing, starting a business, something, or would you try to move into that childhood home? You know, like there's so many little nuances of inheritance that it's important to keep in mind of. And if you're not going to inherit any money, you could always do my favorite game, because I'm not going to really inherit any money, and that's okay, is what would we do if we won the lottery? And you can even do like little ones, like what would we do if we won a scratch off and came into like $25,000, you know, because talking about what you would do with money really forces you to like look at your money now and say like, are we putting it towards our dreams, our goals? Are we set up for if we were to inherit a bunch of money? Do we know what we would do with it? Those are like really fun little ways to get on the ball about talking about finances. And sometimes that can kind of help initiate long-term savings, investing, like all those kind of conversations. And that can be a good way to kick it off. Make it a game, make it fun. Money doesn't have to be scary and icky, you know? Another way you can start talking about money or needing to facilitate a conversation about money is asking for help. Depending on your finances and your financial situation, sometimes this can be harder to do, but to get a third-party perspective on things can really go a long way in your relationship and helping you build a stronger relationship. That's looking for a financial advisor. If you do look for a financial advisor, though, this is my one little thing, make sure that they are a CFP, that they are fee only, and if you can, make sure that they are a NAPFA member. That means that this financial advisor will always put your best interests first. They're not going to sell you anything that you don't actually need. They're not trying to like make money off of everything that you do and are. They do honestly better for themselves when you're doing well. Priorities are much more aligned with you. So yeah, CFP, fee only for sure. Those two things, 1,000,000,000%. And then NAPFA member if you can. And you can go online and like Google NAPFA, and they have like a whole directory of every financial advisor who is an NAPFA member, which is cool. They are not allowed to sell you insurance. That's what that NAPFA means. Another third-party helper who can be really helpful is a financial therapist. And they can be CFPs, but they can also be like clinical psychologists who have a concentration or experience in knowledge of finances. Because when you're looking for a third-party perspective, you want to make sure that there's no bias, that they're going to have actual sound financial advice. Don't let it be like some brother-in-law who studied finance but is like super into crypto. Like, no. or like your, I don't know, random friend who does day trading, like don't ask them for financial advice and helping you in your relationship. Like you want to make sure that they are somebody who understands long-term financial planning, that they are somebody who wants to see your relationship work, who understands like lots of biases that exist around money with women, men. Like you want to make sure that the advice that you are getting and the mediation that you are receiving is going to help you both as a couple and both financially, like long term. If you are interested in looking for like a financial therapist, look online, Financial Therapy Association. I'm gonna also link that down below. You can look through their directory, see if there's somebody near you or in your state that you can reach out to. It is a newer designation, and it's a newer field of study, like maybe 10 years old. The designation itself is like maybe 3 or 4 years old, so it's not as like popular. Hopefully it's growing, and especially where you are living, it's growing, and you have somebody to kind of reach out to, because they would be who I would suggest more than even a CFP, because some financial advisors are more focused on like the market than they are on like human people. That if you were to like interview a CFP, you would kind of get that right away. Kind of like what their priority is and what it is you actually need. I think also a good rule of thumb, whenever you're looking for a third party for anything, lawyers, doctors, whatever, like always make sure to interview like 3-ish people, so that they really fit who you are, you know? And my last suggestion when it comes to being proactive about talking about finances, is to try to give notice. This is very dependent upon your relationship, and like you will obviously know what makes the most sense, but sometimes it's good to just give your partner a heads up, like, hey, this is something that I've been thinking about. We should be having these conversations. Is there a good time for us to have it? Or like I have friends who have Google calendars because their schedules are just so crazy. You can like maybe put in like a little meeting notification, like, hey, let's talk about finances. But I think, and I would like preface this, always kind of give as much detail as possible. Like say, hey, I've been like looking over my bank account, or our accounts if you guys have already joined your money or have decided to join your money together. I had this idea for something I wanted to save towards, or like had this idea for a purchase that we should have as a unit. And it got me thinking that we should have this conversation about money. Put as many details, because for me personally, if my boyfriend came to me and was like, hey, I think we should really have a conversation about finances, like the anxiety in me and the overthinker in me would absolutely freak out. Like I'd be like, oh my God, I'm in trouble? Is he judging me for my spending? Like, which has a lot to do with gender biases around money. Anyway, but like, you know, my like little in your head would go bloop, like what is the worst possible situation that might happen? And so it depends on your partner, because I also have like a best friend who, if her partner just sprang this on her, she would not feel comfortable. Like she would want as much notice, as much like time to like bring thoughts, ideas into that conversation, because sometimes it does, like difficult conversations can make people shut down. And especially around money, if you or your partner experienced when they were a child fights around money, having a conversation about money without like really understanding why somebody is can make people shut down, you know? That's why it's so important to be proactive and start creating like some kind of schedule or some kind of habit around talking about money, because then you're not having fights when the receipts are in front of you. You're evaluating. Are we still working towards our priorities? Are we making purchases that make sense for us? It can really heal and save a lot of what I experienced as a kid, is just like having fights over money that's already been spent, or having fights over money that needs to be spent. When you can really talk about money, it allows things to be more about curiosity rather than like a power struggle, you know? So that's why for me, it's so important to be proactive about having conversations regarding money. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Again, it's going to be a series, so please stick around for the next one. And this has been awesome. See you soon. Make sure to click subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.